Regret is one of the most powerful emotions someone can feel. You can react to it in any number of ways, and regardless of the path you take, it can lead to incredibly moving stories. Today, I'm going to talk about one of those stories and why it's so powerful. This is The Girl Who Buried Her Feelings, Ryu Leone. When Ryu was introduced in DanMachi, I don't think anyone could have predicted how compelling, important, and tragic a character she would become. There is nothing special about her introduction. Belle Crenel, the main character, meets a girl named Cyr, and Ryu happens to be Cyr's coworker at the tavern. That's it. But I'm going to take you back further before the show begins so that you can really understand who she is and why she takes the actions she does. Then eventually we'll catch back up. What's interesting about Ryu is her story is cyclical. This is a woman who is constantly broken down from within, only to be built back up by the kindness of others. Her worst enemy is the nature of who she is. Everything begins in the Ryu Malua forest, where Ryu and her fellow elves resided. During her upbringing, one thing became abundantly clear to her. Despite the elves being physically beautiful, they were disgusting individuals. We all know some of those. These elves were deeply prejudiced towards other races. Eventually it became too much for her and she decided to leave the forest. This gave her strong feelings on what's right and wrong. Unfortunately, growing up under such circumstances ingrained certain behaviors in her as well. It was elven custom to never allow others to touch you, and instinctually, she would swat away anyone who attempted any kind of physical touch. Even later on, after Cyr saves her, Ryu says some pretty mean shit to Mia about her qualities as a dwarf. At their core, refusing physical contact and judging by race are a rejection of others. Ryu knows this, and it causes her a certain level of self-loathing. In other words, she breaks herself down. It's Elise from the Estrella Familia that lifts her back up. She's the first person Ryu instinctively allows to touch her. This acceptance of Elise helps Ryu both heal and grow as she joins that familia. As her time with the Estrella Familia continues, her sense of right and wrong morph into vague but powerful views on justice. The girl has strong opinions, we can say that much. In another world, she may have been one hell of a ranter on social media. She's constantly getting into it with her familia about idealism versus realism, usually against Kaguya. She's often told she's naive, and she is. It's honestly not so dissimilar from Belle early on in the series. When she's asked, what is justice? She never really has a real answer. Even though they probably wouldn't get along at Thanksgiving, she grows close with her familia, especially with Elise and her goddess Estrella. These are people she can rely on, which makes what happens next so tragic. The Estrella Familia battles Evilis, a group of familia hellbent on, you guessed it, evil. The apex of this is deep inside the dungeon, which triggers a cataclysm. The dungeon reacts to the conflict, and the Juggernaut is summoned. One by one, the Estrella Familia is slaughtered in front of Ryu. The remaining members offer themselves up so that Ryu can take out the Juggernaut, and it doesn't work. She survives, but she failed. Her comrade's sacrifice was for nothing. She has a severe case of survivor's guilt, and now all she wants is revenge. She speaks with her goddess and is told to abandon her justice. Ryu believes her goddess has given up on her. She tells Estrella to leave Arario because she doesn't want her to witness the acts she's about to commit. And commit she does. Ryu goes on a rampage, murdering not only each member of Evilis, but anyone remotely associated with them. Her rage continues until there is nothing left. By abandoning her justice, she proved the argument that had been made against her so many times with her familia. Vengeance isn't justice. Her ideals don't hold up in the real world. She couldn't even live up to them. Because of her actions, she was blacklisted by the Adventurers Guild and became a fugitive. When she finally destroyed all of Evilis, she passed out in an alley and was on the verge of death. A death she welcomed for the actions she'd taken. Again, she'd been broken. That's when Cyr arrives. Cyr saves Ryu and helps nurse her back to health. Ryu notices that she had allowed Cyr to touch her, something she'd only allowed Elise to do before. Ryu is confused by Cyr's kindness and admits she has no reason left to live. Comedically, Mia fixing her a good meal gives her one for the time being. eating good food, though that meal did come with the consequence of having to work at her tavern, the hostess of fertility. The more time she spends with Seer, the more she sees similarities between her and Elise. They even both enjoy high places, which fittingly ties into Ryu's moniker of Gale Wind. As time goes on, she realizes that everyone at the hostess of fertility has gone through tough times of their own, and that this is essentially a family bound by their mutual recovery from depression. At the beginning of the series, we aren't given any indication of this. When she's introduced in episode 1, she's quiet and stoic, the complete opposite of what she used to be. In the first handful of times she's on screen, she feels like a background character. First instance that shows there might be more to her is when Lily robs Bell of his knife and tries hiding it. Ryu happens to walk by and instantly notices the concealed blade, recognizes it's Bell's, and then takes it from Lily effortlessly. You start thinking, okay, that was not a normal interaction. The longer the series plays out, the more hints we're given. Bell comes to her for advice on how to rank up. She makes a point to him that having a party is a necessity for traversing the dungeon, and that he should avoid the deeper floors. There's a time she gets hit on by an adventurer, and she easily restrains him. Now, knowing what we know from earlier, this all makes a lot of sense, but at the time, we don't know any of her background. It was nice, subtle storytelling. What we do come to know is, oh shit, Ryu's a badass. She's a former adventurer, and a powerful one at that. Gale Wind is well known throughout Aurario, though few know that it's Ryu. Those subtle hints continue to pile up over the next few seasons. When Bell and the other members of the Hestia Familia get stuck on the middle floors of the dungeon, a team is put together to save them, and Ryu is specifically chosen to assist. The biggest tease for her past we get in the early seasons starts off as a fan service gag, and then becomes far more powerful. They're down in the dungeon, and Bell, accidentally, stumbles upon her bathing. After apologizing, they go on a walk and end up at a burial site. The burial site for the Estrella Familia. And for the first time, we see the inner workings of her mind and the contempt she has for herself. She calls herself a violent elf consumed by revenge. There's more to her, but we haven't seen it to this point because she's buried it all. Honestly, I thought this was going to be all we get for her backstory. For a while after that, she's reduced to being the Hestia family's ringer whenever they're in danger. She assists with the Black Goliath. When the Apollo Familia attacks Bell and the Hestia Familia, this leads to war games. Ryu is again called to aid Team Hestia. She's central to their strategy and used as a diversion. In the next season, this continues. First, she aids them while they're inside the dungeon locating the monster Vine's home. The second time, Bell's trying to protect Vine and the other intelligent monsters called Xenos. Ryu is again used as a diversion to stop Ys Wallenstein from tailing Bell. What's important about this arc is this is where the teases for what's to come start ramping up. At one point when she meets up with Bell in the dungeon, I believe we get our first Evilus reference in the series, and Ryu says it's a group that she wants to destroy. She agrees to work with Hermes because he promises to give her intel on them. When the Minotaur Asterius attacks her and has her dead to rights, he leaves. It's important to note that her reaction to this is not relief, but confusion. In series, she's never been overly expressive or open, but she has a kind heart. She keeps her issues within. This makes the beginning of season 4 so surprising, when Gale Wind is accused of murdering someone in a cold-blooded rage. She's now being pursued by other adventurers. At the drop of a hat, everyone has turned on her. Of course, Bell doesn't believe the fake news, and he tags along with the adventurers who go looking for her. When he finally catches up to her though, she's out of control. Her rage makes her almost unrecognizable, and she screams for Bell to leave. We finally see the extent to which she's been broken. But it's Bell, and he knows Ryu. He's not going to give up on her, for a good reason. Apparently, Evilus wasn't completely wiped out after all. A man named Jura survived, and has been manipulating adventurers to turn them against Ryu, while he uses the knowledge he's gained in the last 5 years to re-summon the Juggernaut, the dungeon's ultimate killing machine. His plan works, and like before, the Juggernaut slaughters everything in its path. Even Bell gets destroyed. Then the dungeon floor collapses, and Bell and Ryu are plunged even further down to deeper floors. They're trapped. Yet, Ryu's seemingly calm on the surface. Again, she's burying her true feelings. She's told herself Bell is only in this situation because of her, and it's that guilt that pushes her forward so that she can get him out alive. So they power through monster after monster, attack after attack, and keep moving to escape. In the process, they grow closer and have some really wholesome moments. But that doesn't change the fact she has no intention of making it out, just Belle. And this is when we start seeing more of her past. The stoic, quiet waitress keeps to herself as a way of masking her feelings of emptiness. That's not who she used to be at all. She was a headstrong, outspoken member of her familia. Her ideals and views on justice were a core part of her personality. But she was beaten down by reality and guilt into someone who is basically coasting by. She literally fights with Kaguya's blades. Kaguya was the realist. It's extremely relatable too. The older you get, the more your dreams and aspirations fade a lot of times, because reality dictated you choose another path. Ryu, a once proud idealist, is someone who gets so torn down that she no longer has those same ideals, and not only becomes jaded, but has deep contempt for herself. Through the entirety of the series, it's always been Ryu who helped Belle and the Hestia Familia when they've needed it. For the first time, she's the one in need of help, but she'll never ask for it. She relied on her guild, and it got them killed, so she can only rely on herself. Her life doesn't matter as long as Belle can get out. This is made abundantly clear when Ryu sacrifices herself inside the dungeon to allow Belle to escape. It can all finally end. She no longer has to deal with the guilt. She can join Elise and the others in the afterlife. Except Belle comes back. As he does, we get a flashback of her past. She asks, what happens if someone makes their ideals reality? Elise simply smiles and says, there's a special name for that kind of person, a hero. It's such a beautiful moment as we cut back to Belle doing everything in his power to save Ryu. Infinite spawning monsters? Doesn't matter. He's going to do things his way, which means never leaving someone behind. He's going to make his ideals reality and be Ryu's hero. His kindness and his refusal to give up on her, despite all she's done and the fact she's given up on herself, allows her to re-pursue her goals of justice. She can finally rely on someone else again, Mr. Cornell. And like that, the cycle has continued. Belle has built her back up. However, she still needs to move forward, and they still have the Juggernaut to deal with. Poetically, it's not Belle who defeats the Juggernaut, it's Ryu. Belle has given her a reason to fight. She not only slays the physical demon that caused her so much pain and heartache, but her inner demons as well. Ryu has and uses 10 orbs in the final fight against the Juggernaut, and it's really cool because they represent each of her fallen comrades, and each orb is used differently, which I imagine represents their different personalities. In that fight, she's on the verge of death, and she sees the members of her familia in the afterlife, and they tell her, it's not your time yet. Her battle with life may be ongoing, but the battle with the Juggernaut and herself have come to an end. She can forgive herself and really start living. We revisit the context of Ryu and her goddess from before. Estrella had told Ryu to give up on her justice, not as criticism, but out of love. She realized if she had told Ryu otherwise, not to enact revenge, it would have totally consumed her, and she would have fallen even further. But now she's reached the point where she can finally stop burying her feelings. With that, I'm out.